and your water bills are going up. Not by as much as the water companies wanted them to. They were talking about 44%, certainly at Thames Water. Others even basically doubling the water bills, but they are going to be going up. The regulator for water companies, Ofwat, has basically decided they would go up by an average of about £94 over the next 5 years. So not just £94 next year, but over that period of time. Well, let's talk about this with Ross Clark. He's a journalist and author, of course, the brilliant book, Not Zero. I always read it out. I love the title. How an irrational target will impoverish you, help China, and won't even save the planet. Good morning, good afternoon to you, Ross.
Hello, Julia.
Thanks so much for joining us. So these bills are going up. They're not going up by as much as many of us had feared.
No, that's because Ofwat, the regulator, has refused the water companies permission to put it up by the full bills up by the full amount they wanted to do. And of course, we have this sort of privatised water industry, notionally private enterprise, but of course it's actually heavily regulated, and the prices are fixed, and so it's not really a sort of private industry in the sense of sort of supermarkets are and that sort of thing.
But that's one of the issues, isn't it? And I think people tend to go into two camps: nationalise everything and privatise everything. So, selling off the family silver or whatever. It seems to me there are obviously some things that everyone has to use, which it makes sense if there is competition and they're in the private sector. But there are obviously some natural monopolies, like the water coming through the pipes. I would say also the gas and the electricity, where and to some extent the trains as well. It doesn't really make sense for them to be privatised because there isn't competition. And if you just want good management, why not just appoint good management? Because when the water companies, the electricity companies and others are able to effectively siphon off a load of the profits they make often to countries that are abroad, Abu Dhabi banking investment firms and the like, as is the case with Thames Water. But then they say, we haven't got enough money to mend all the pipes, haven't got enough money to build reservoirs or build new sewage works, and it's not our fault, Governor. It doesn't really make any sense.
No, well, this is the whole crux of the problem. I mean, I'm no socialist, but
you are not a socialist. I would safely say.
I'm not a socialist. No. But I mean, the whole purpose of privatisation. I mean, there's several possible advantages. One is to improve customer experience and get prices down through competition. Well, that is not happened in the case of the water industry. It would be very difficult to make it happen in the case of the water industry because we don't want the roads dug up to put sort of 5 different companies' pipes to our house, and we choose which one we want to use which day. The other sort of reason for possible privatisation was to bring private capital in. Well, I mean, it has brought private capital in, yet we've still had this woeful underinvestment. We haven't been investing in reservoirs. We haven't been investing in mending the leaks. Still a quarter of the water that's pumped into the system goes missing through leaks before it even gets to our house. And we haven't had the investment in the sewers either, which might have alleviated some of these pollution problems.
I mean, we do have an issue with the fact that our sewers were put in the Victorian age, a lot of them, and then we've got a different system, haven't we, from a lot of countries that have done it more recently, in terms of where the water that runs off into the drains from there's a big rainfall goes into the same system as where the sewage from our toilets and from our baths and showers and things go. So that's why we do have a bit of a bigger problem in that area. But that's sort of a penalty for having done this many years ago. But if it is the 21st century, you'd think they'd be on top of this stuff by now.
Yeah, well, as you say, I mean, this problem goes back to the Victorian times. And it's not just Britain, by the way, it is other countries as well. Made the fatal decision in the 19th century to combine the storm drains, which drain the streets, with the foul sewers, which drain toilets and so on. And,
in retrospect, it does seem like a silly idea, I have to say.
It does. And it would cost, I mean, the water industry came up with a figure a couple of years ago. In 2021 there was a report, and it's a horrendous amount of money. Just check what I wrote down here. It's like it was going to be between 350 and 600 billion pounds fully to separate.
Tell you what, though, cheaper than net zero. So I mean, if we're looking at things, but this is the thing. We've had this issue where we've got lot of more. I mean, coverage now. I mean, Lib Dems talked about nothing else. It was social care and sewage and water in the last election campaign. People are very aware now that we've got sewage often going into our waterways, whether it's rivers or whether it's to the sea. And it is true. This is happening, and to a certain extent, it is happening at a greater rate. But the interesting thing there is that actually we're monitoring it more, so we're more aware of it. They were testing like only sort of 2% of our waterways, and now they test a much higher percentage. What a surprise! They found more sewage.
Yes, I mean, this problem goes back decades and predates privatisation. I remember back in the 1970s when parents used to take me to the beach, and on some days we couldn't go because of sewage outflows.
I remember those days.
It's absolutely disgusting.
And our beaches have been massively cleaned up since then, though, haven't they?
Yes, yeah. And I mean, the figure I sort of read out of £600 billion up to that would be for total separation of the foul and storm drains. But I mean, we could make a big difference with a lot less money than that by
absolutely.
Intervening in the worst places and reduce the instances.
Yeah, I mean, it seems to me also one of the other big issues, Ross, is the fact that we have got an awful lot more people in the country. We got 10 million more people in the country than we had 20 years ago. Those people are all, having a shower, we hope, going to the toilet, running dishwashers, and like, I mean, what a surprise. We've got far more capacity needed, but as far as I'm aware, we've not built any new capacity.
Well, certainly not in terms of reservoirs. I mean, you go sort of walk in the Peak District in Wales and so on, you get these sort of fantastic reservoirs that were built sort of between Victorian times and the mid-20th century. And then you get to about the 1970s and it just all stops. There's just virtually no new investment in reservoirs since then. And you think, well, how the population's grown and how our demand for water has grown. And the sort of water companies have really sort of taken this decision to sweat their existing assets and they don't really have an incentive.
No, exactly. And the whole point of it was that they would have private investment. But again, I got an email the other day from Thames Water saying, well, I know it's raining a lot now, our reservoirs are nice and full, but you can still, use less water by having a shorter shower. And I was so cross. It's like sod off. I'll have a shower as long as I sodding well want to. Thank you very much. You build reservoirs so you can look after it. And I know if we get 3 more days of sun, they'll be telling me there's a hose pipe ban. We just got to stop putting up with this nonsense. But you talked about lack of investment. Here's the latest announcement from the new government. Ed Miliband, the Energy Secretary, he's ordered an immediate ban on new drilling in the North Sea in a decision that overrules his own officials. There's talk about a wave of legal action being triggered, but he's told regulators not to approve a new round of drilling that was slated for confirmation in just the coming weeks. What do you make of that?
Yeah, well, of course, this isn't public investment. This is a case of oil and gas companies using their existing fields in the North Sea, just squeeze a bit extra gas and oil out them by drilling new wells. And Ed Miliband seems to have put an absolute stop to it. And, Labour's policy was supposed to be, well, we won't develop new oil fields, but, we will allow the exploitation of existing fields. And it seems, well, that's just going to come to a stop. Well, I mean, we're going to be using gas and oil for many decades yet, even if we do succeed in getting to a net zero or something. And all that it means is we'll just be importing it, and we'll be more reliant on the Middle East, more reliant on these troubled parts of the world where we tend to buy gas and oil.
It is quite bizarre, isn't it? The lack of joined up thinking. I really do despair. Ross Clark, you've been someone who's trying to make sense, but also appreciate that, journalist and author of Not Zero.